Good morning. Welcome to this week's Thinking Partner video. Let me just bring up my notes so I know the stuff I want to talk to you about. Today's video is called The Myth of Multitasking. I want to ask you something. How many tabs do you have open right now? I ask because I've got loads already. 9:30 in the morning, I've already got loads of stuff running. But I don't just mean like on your browser. I mean like in your head. How many things are you half across? How many things are you half tracking? How many things are you half thinking about? Even as you watch this, I just wrote myself a little list of the things I need to remember to talk to someone about today because I want to make sure I don't forget anything. Because a lot of founders are across everything like simultaneously, moving between a client problem, a team question, a financial decision, a strategic plan, to a meeting, to an email that needs a response, to a family situation, to a conversation they need to have with a relative, to all of this stuff, sometimes in the space of like a single morning or a single hour, if you're particularly unlucky. Sometimes we wear the ability to do this like a badge of honor, this ability to kind of keep multiple plates spinning all the time across different areas and to stay across everything, to multitask. Well, there's some science behind it, and that's what I want to talk about this video, because multitasking, I was going to say it isn't a skill. It is a skill, but I would challenge that it's a useful skill or a good skill, if anything is said to be good. It's a bit of a myth. Every time you do it, every single switch you make between different tasks and different modes of thinking, your brain pays a price that adds up across the day in ways that are really costing you. And that, yeah, I'm going to talk about that more in this video. I just need to make a little adjustment to my slightly jury-rigged camera. There you go. Before I move on, I'll introduce myself. I'm Annette Corbett. I'm a thinking partner for women founders who want to build a business with genuine, meaningful impact, but without running themselves into the ground. You're watching the Thinking Partner video series, which is like a weekly series I do, exploring the evidence behind what happens when we don't give ourselves space to think and what becomes possible when we do. So let me get into it. Now, there is a researcher called Gloria Mark at the University of California. As you can tell, if you've watched any of these videos, I'm enjoying getting into the science of this, enjoying getting into the research. But this particular researcher, Gloria Mark, she spent over 20 years studying how people actually work, like watching them in natural environments, tracking what they do and when, what effect it has. And what she found was really fascinating. Also, from what I've read so far, slightly alarming for anyone who multitasks. The average, she refers to them as like knowledge workers, like people who use their head for stuff. The average knowledge worker switches tasks every 3 minutes. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But just think about yourself sitting here now. Do you have an impulse to look at your phone? Mine just buzzed. It's like, oh, should I check it? I can't do that. I'm on live video. But you get the idea. So, like, not once an hour, not every 30 minutes, every 3 minutes. And after an interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully return to the original task. I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. Every 3 minutes you're switching, and roughly 23 minutes it takes you to get back to what you were doing before you switched. 23 minutes to get back to where you were after a single interruption. Which means if you're being interrupted or if you're doing something to interrupt yourself every 3 minutes, you are almost never in a state of being like fully present, full deep focus at all. You're spending your entire day in a kind of partial attention, skimming the surface of everything and not really quite getting below into the meat of it. And this is called the switch cost effect. And the cost isn't just the time that you're spending getting back, it's like a cognitive resource. I talked about this in previous videos, this idea that you have like a a finite pool of cognitive resource each day. Each switch takes something from that same pool. And by the end of the day of constant switching, that pool is depleted in ways that go beyond that sort of frazzled, tired feeling you get from a day of doing that kind of work. Now, I want to mention another researcher, as I say, I've been getting into it, who's done some really interesting work in this area as well. It's a similar kind of field. If this first part has sounded familiar, then this second part definitely will as well. Because there's another researcher, another woman, actually, interestingly, called Sophie Leroy, University of Washington this time, and she coined the term attention residue to describe what happens every time you switch tasks as well. So very closely linked with the other research. Even after you've like physically moved on to the next thing, even after you've like closed the tab or put down the phone or walked into the meeting, so you've like begun to move on to the next thing, part of your brain is still processing the previous task. There's a kind of like cognitive snail trail dragging behind you, lingering, unresolved, taking out kind of mental bandwidth in the background, even on a job that you think you've completed. You're not fully present in what you're doing, and you can't necessarily tell. What makes this particularly interesting is what Leroy excuse me, this is probably my mental snail trail from the things I've already done this morning before I came onto this video. But what makes this interesting is what Leroy found is what she found about what reduces that kind of presence. It's not finishing the task, it's not closing the laptop, it's whether you feel a sense of like cognitive kind of closure. It's whether it feels done. It's that genuine sense of having reached a stopping point rather than just a pause, or rather than being kind of pulled away from one thing into another. So if you think about that very kind of disruptive feeling of the phone ringing when you're doing something else, or someone coming up to your desk when you're in the middle of trying to do deep work and pulling your attention away, it's that kind of, yeah, it still feels open, it still feels unfinished. Which is why a founder who moves straight from like one meeting into the next, or jumps from a difficult client email to a team conversation without any transition, that's why it feels different from just feeling like tired. Because that founder is carrying the residue of everything that came before into everything that comes next. And nothing she's doing is getting her full attention. Not even the things that really need it, especially not the things that really need it. If you look back at my video that talks about default mode network and the kind of thinking that you need to be able to do the deep creative work, the strategic work, the sort of higher level vision kind of stuff. And I think arguably this has got so much worse since we put so much stuff online, she says, online, because we often schedule things back to back, especially if we work from home as well. We don't have that kind of decompression break of like, even as we're walking back from a meeting room to our desk via making a cup of tea in the kitchen, or getting a train to go from one physical location to another. We might even be leaping from like one Zoom room straight into another with no particular buffer, and they might even be on like totally different topics, totally different kinds of thinking. And all of that is while you've got your phone vibrating in the background, or the notifications popping up in the corner of your screen, taking just a little bit of that cognitive resource, a little bit of that attention away from being fully present. Now I know what some of you are probably thinking. We talk about, multitasking is one of those throwaway words that we use all the time. We talk about women being better at multitasking, all these kinds of things. So I know you might be thinking, well, I've heard this before, this kind of thing. It's probably true for most people, but I'm genuinely good at multitasking. I can hold a lot at once. Well, yeah, maybe possibly you genuinely can, but there is research around the impact that has. And that's why I wanted to talk about this video. Because what we call multitasking isn't actually like doing more than one thing at once. The brain doesn't really work like that. As I talked about, again, in that default mode network, we can be in like task brain, or we can be in like thinking brain. One is on, one is off. They don't run at the same time. What it's doing is actually just switching really rapidly between things, and so fast that it feels simultaneous, but it isn't. And each of those rapid switches carries a little bit of cost. It's like friction. If you think about the little bit of energy that was released in the form of heat when you have friction, heat and noise. I'm getting into physics now instead of neuroscience, so I should probably stop myself. But research consistently shows that people who believe they are good at multitasking are often the ones who are most affected by the switch cost effect, which is a right pain, isn't it? Heavy multitaskers perform worse on tasks requiring focus and like filtering out irrelevant information. Not better, the people who say they can't multitask. The confidence in the ability basically doesn't match the cognitive reality of the situation. There's one more thing worth naming here. I'm not going to overload you with more science, but what I wanted to say is the switching itself can become a habit, even like kind of an addiction. That constant ping of notifications, the pull of the next thing, the relief of variety when one task feels hard or something that we're avoiding, perhaps. The brain starts to seek that switch, which means deep, sustained, single focus work even harder and harder to access over time. The more you multitask, the more your brain gets used to multitasking, the more it seeks that variety, the harder it is to focus down and do that deep work. So I don't want to just share all this like science and information with you and sound like some kind of messenger of doom. I thought I'd make a few suggestions about what you can actually do with this information. A few things worth considering. Protect single task blocks. Even 1 or 2 hours in a day where you are doing one thing only. No switching, no checking your emails, no being available. All of that changes what's possible. The research suggests this is where your best thinking can happen, and not like squeezed into the gaps in between everything else. In a previous video, in fact, I talked about I can't remember his name, former CEO of LinkedIn, who deliberately puts like 2-hour blocks of time, like thinking time, empty space in his diary, because he realized that he became so much more productive when he did that instead of just trying to fill everything with doing and meetings and tasks. Next, give yourself transition time, a bit of a buffer between tasks, between meetings, between contexts as well, so different kinds of thinking. Even just like 5 minutes of genuine stopping, not picking up your phone, not doing something else that is related to work, not like squeezing in a little bit of admin in between, actually letting things settle, letting the previous thing end before the next thing starts. This is what creates that sense of cognitive closure and reduces that attention residue idea. This is where working from home actually can be quite useful because you can go and put on a wash or put your dishes away or something that's really kind of physical and separate. It can really help to just kind of shift your brain from one mode into another. Next up, notice the switching habit. How often are you self-interrupting? How many times do you reach your phone or flip to a different tab on your screen or check something that isn't quite what you're intending to work on? Not because you like need to, but because your brain is kind of learning to seek that variety, is kind of hungering for a little diversion off somewhere else. Because starting to notice things like this is how you can get onto the path of actually starting to change it. And of course, the last tip, because it's my thing, getting things out of your head. A significant amount of the switching and residue that founders experience comes from like holding too many open loops internally, too many things that are kind of decisions that are half made or threads that haven't quite been resolved. Those kind of things that are like just sitting and waiting and taking up space and competing for your attention. Getting those out onto paper, into some kind of trusted system if you use an app for that, thought through properly with someone else, which is of course what I love doing and helping people with. All of those ideas, they kind of reduce that cognitive background noise that makes switching feel so inevitable. Now, the capacity of our brains is, I don't even know, I haven't even looked it up. It can hold a lot. It's just those kind of open, unfinished things, it's like they take up more mental bandwidth than the kind of memories. I imagine they're stored in a different place. I should do, that might end up being a future video. But I want to give you a question to take away. Think about, what day is it? Wednesday. Let's think about yesterday. I had a day where I was in and out of, I had 4 Zoom meetings. Having more than 3 in a day is unusual for me. And the gaps in between were quite small. And some of those gaps I used for catching up with bits of admin. Some of the gaps I went and, as I said earlier, I went and washed the dishes, or I just went for a short walk. I want you to think about your yesterday. How much of it was spent in sustained single focus attention, and how much of it was constant switching? If you were to kind of think about the percentage of time you spent in focus and the percentage of time you felt you spent in that sort of switching, gear changing mode, what might that look like if you took a moment to consider it? And if the honest answer was it was mostly switching, think about what you could do differently. Perhaps one of the things I suggest is, so protecting single task blocks, giving yourself a buffer, like transition time between things, contexts, tasks, noticing the switching habit, which is part of what that question can help you with, and then finding ways of getting things out of your head as well. So that's my invitation to you this morning. Oh, this video has ended up longer than usual for some reason. Anyway, that's pretty much the end of this video. I will be here next Wednesday for another piece of this. I've got another couple of slightly random videos that I'm thinking of recording in the meantime before next Wednesday, if I get a chance, so look out for those. But if any of what I've shared today resonates, if you recognize that kind of constant switching, the grinding gear changes in your day, the attention residue, the feeling of not being really fully present in anything that you're doing, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message, drop me a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, you can give me a thumbs up and subscribe as well to the channel, which is still really new. Next week, we're going to be looking at, I think we're going to look at the physical cost of not stopping. I realize I've been doing a lot of kind of heady, neuroscience-y, brain type stuff in the previous videos, and I talked right in the first video about how I wanted to look at how chronic stress impacts on the body and not just the brain. So I think that's going to be the next video, which in itself might end up being split up into more than one video, I think, because there's a lot. It might shock you, some of it. In the meantime, have a fantastic day. Take care of yourself. See if you can find some focused time in your day. And I'll see you next week.